In this episode, we're going to learn how security leaders look at projects and immediately see the risk decisions hidden inside scope, timelines, quality, and budget. For brand new learners, projects can feel like neutral containers where work happens, but projects are really collections of trade-offs. Every time a team decides what is in scope and what is out, how fast something must be delivered, what quality level is acceptable, and how much money is available, they are also deciding how much security risk the organization will carry. Security analysis does not mean turning every project into a slow, paperwork-heavy process. It means understanding how project constraints shape exposure and then guiding the project toward choices that reduce high-impact risk while still delivering value. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to recognize the security implications of project decisions and explain them in a calm, practical way that supports better outcomes. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Project scope defines what the project will deliver, but it also defines what protections will exist when the project is done. When security is not part of scope discussions, security features often become invisible until late, at which point teams say they are out of scope or too expensive to add. A security lens asks what the project touches that could create harm if handled poorly, such as sensitive data, critical services, privileged access, or external integrations. It also asks what the project changes about the environment, because change itself can create new attack surface and new failure modes. For example, adding a new user role may require new access rules, new logging, and new monitoring expectations, even if those are not the main product features. If scope includes new functionality but excludes the safeguards needed to operate it safely, the project may still be considered complete, yet the organization's risk posture may worsen. Security analysis pushes for scope that includes essential controls as part of the definition of done, not as optional extras. A security lens also distinguishes between functional scope and trust scope, meaning what the system is allowed to do versus what the system can be trusted to do safely. Many projects expand functionality quickly, such as adding data sharing, automation, or new integrations, but those expansions also increase what could go wrong if the product is misused or compromised. Trust scope includes decisions like who can access what, how identity is verified, and what actions are recorded for investigation. Beginners sometimes assume trust is a single control, like logging in with a password, but trust is built from multiple choices that shape how safely the system can operate under stress and misuse. When a project expands functional scope without expanding trust scope, security risk rises sharply because the system can do more harm when something fails. Security analysis helps the project keep these two scopes aligned, so capability growth does not outpace protection. Timelines shape security because speed pressures teams to cut corners, even when no one intends to be reckless. A short deadline can reduce design thinking, reduce review time, reduce testing depth, and encourage temporary workarounds that become permanent. From a security lens, the question is not simply whether the project is fast, but which safeguards are threatened by time pressure. For example, if the timeline is tight, teams may skip threat thinking, avoid difficult access design, or postpone monitoring and logging until after launch, which creates blind spots during the most vulnerable early period. Security analysis does not automatically demand longer timelines, because businesses often have legitimate reasons for urgency. Instead, security analysis helps teams choose what must be done before release to avoid unacceptable risk, and what can be phased safely after release with clear accountability. Timelines become manageable when security is explicit about what cannot be deferred without creating a dangerous exposure window. Quality is another project dimension that directly shapes security, even though teams often treat quality as a separate topic from security. Quality includes correctness, reliability, maintainability, and consistency, and security depends on all of those. Poor quality code and fragile systems produce security issues because they create unexpected behavior, weak error handling, and inconsistent enforcement of rules. For example, If access checks are implemented inconsistently across parts of an application, a user might find a path that bypasses intended restrictions. If error handling is sloppy, sensitive information may leak in error messages or logs. If systems are unreliable, teams may disable controls to keep things running, which increases risk over time. A security lens treats security as a quality attribute rather than a bolt-on feature, meaning that improving general engineering quality often improves security posture. When you analyze quality through a security lens, you ask whether the system will behave predictably under stress, misuse, and partial failure, because those conditions are where security and reliability meet. Budget constraints shape security because controls cost money, either directly or indirectly. Direct costs might include funding for security staff, training, or services that support monitoring and incident response. Indirect costs include development time spent building secure patterns, time spent testing and reviewing changes, and time spent fixing issues discovered later. A common beginner misunderstanding is that security is expensive mainly because of tools, but many of the highest value security improvements are process and design choices that cost time and attention more than cash. Still, budgets matter because limited resources force prioritization, and prioritization determines what risk remains. A security lens asks which investments reduce the highest impact risk and which investments prevent expensive emergencies later. It also asks whether the project's budget includes the costs of operating securely after delivery, because a project that funds a new feature but does not fund ongoing security maintenance is creating a long-term liability. When security analyzes scope, timelines, quality, and budget together, the main goal is identifying the most dangerous trade-offs early enough to adjust them. For example, if a project timeline is aggressive and scope is large, security risk increases because teams may skip controls and testing to meet deadlines. In that case, one option is narrowing scope to focus on the safest, highest value features while preserving essential controls for those features. Another option is keeping scope but extending timeline, which may be less acceptable to the business. Another option is increasing resources so the team can maintain quality and security within the deadline, which may require budget changes. These are not purely security decisions. They are business decisions with security consequences. Security leadership adds value by making the consequences visible and by proposing realistic options rather than simply objecting. Visibility turns conflict into decision-making, which is how security influences outcomes without becoming the enemy of delivery. A key technique in security lens analysis is identifying what must be true for the project to be safe enough to release. This is not perfection. It is a minimum safe state that prevents high-impact harm. For example, if a project involves sensitive data, a minimum safe state might include clear access rules, strong authentication, and logging for sensitive actions. If a project introduces a new external integration, a minimum safe state might include controlled credentials, limited access scope, and monitoring for unusual activity. If a project changes critical infrastructure, a minimum safe state might include rollback plans and tested recovery procedures. These are examples of safeguards that protect the organization during the period when the new change is most vulnerable, which is often right after release. Security analysis helps the project define those minimum conditions in advance so teams can plan and avoid last-minute surprises. When minimum conditions are agreed early, security has a clear basis for supporting release or requesting changes. Another element of analysis is recognizing hidden complexity, because hidden complexity often creates security risk through unexpected behaviors and incomplete coverage. A project may look small from a feature standpoint, but still touch multiple systems, permissions, data flows, and operational routines. Each touchpoint creates a chance for misconfiguration, inconsistent control enforcement, or monitoring gaps. A security lens encourages teams to map critical dependencies and interfaces, because interfaces are common weak points where trust assumptions break. Beginners often assume the main risk is inside the system itself, but many incidents begin at the seams, where systems connect and responsibilities are unclear. By highlighting hidden complexity early, security can encourage simpler designs, clearer ownership, and more reliable controls. Simplifying complexity is one of the best ways to reduce risk without increasing disruption. Security analysis also includes thinking about how the project will be supported after it is delivered, because many risks appear after launch during maintenance and change. If a project has no clear owner, no plan for patching, and no plan for monitoring, it becomes a long-term exposure. If a project depends on a small number of experts and lacks documentation, it becomes fragile, and fragile systems are often handled with risky shortcuts during outages. A security lens asks who will own the system, how changes will be reviewed, how incidents will be handled, and how vulnerabilities will be managed over time. This may sound like operations, but operations is where security posture is either preserved or allowed to drift. When a project includes operational readiness as part of its delivery definition, security becomes more sustainable and less reactive. That sustainability reduces future costs, because well-operated systems generate fewer emergencies and fewer crisis-driven fixes. When security engages projects thoughtfully, it can reduce friction rather than increase it. Teams often resist security input because they fear delay and rework, but a strong security lens focuses on early clarity and practical options. It identifies the high-impact risk drivers, proposes minimum safe conditions, and helps the project prioritize controls that provide the greatest risk reduction for the effort. It also respects reality by acknowledging that not everything can be done at once, which is why phasing and scope adjustments can be useful. The security lens is not about demanding perfection. It is about preventing predictable failures that cause major harm. When teams see security helping them avoid late surprises and prevent incident-driven chaos, they begin to welcome security involvement. That is how security becomes embedded in project thinking rather than treated as a last-minute gate. As you put this together, analyzing project scope, timelines, quality, and budget through a security lens becomes a disciplined way to make risk visible and manageable. Scope tells you what capability is being created and what safeguards must be included to keep it safe. Timelines tell you where pressure may cause risky shortcuts and what must be protected from being deferred. Quality tells you whether the system will behave predictably under stress and misuse, which is essential for security. Budget tells you what resources exist to build and operate securely, and where prioritization must be explicit. When security can connect these project dimensions to risk posture and to practical choices, security supports both delivery and protection. That is how projects deliver value without quietly increasing exposure. And it is how security leadership helps organizations build things that last safely.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.